The sun had barely risen when I felt the ache of disappointment knot itself in my stomach. Today was supposed to be special, my 28th birthday. I had quietly prayed for peace, maybe even a slice of cake and a smile from someone who remembered I existed. Instead, I woke up to the sharp clang of my father-in-law's walking stick banging against my bedroom door. "Wake up, Adejua," he barked. "You've overstayed your welcome." The words sliced deeper than I expected. Not even a good morning. Not even on my birthday. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, trying to make sense of what was happening. My husband was nowhere to be found. Again. It had been 3 months since he traveled for a business trip and never returned. I'd stopped calling, he never picked up. Now, it was just me and his father under the same roof, a roof I had grown to dread. But what Papa Alyamai didn't know, what no one knew, was that the very house he stood in, the one he was kicking me out of, now belonged to me. That morning, before he began shouting, I had received a call from my late mother's lawyer. "Happy birthday, Miss Adejua," he said warmly. "Your mother left her Lagos property in your name. The transfer is complete. Congratulations." I hadn't even had time to process the news. But something inside me knew, today would change everything. Adejua had grown up poor in a dusty town just outside Benin City. Her mother, a schoolteacher with calloused palms and eyes heavy with wisdom, had always told her, "Dignity doesn't shout. It walks away when it must." Her mother died quietly during the Harmattan season, just a year after Adejua's wedding. She had married Kelechi Alyamai for love, or what she thought was love. The son of a wealthy businessman in Lagos, Kelechi had swept her off her feet with expensive gifts and charming words. She thought she was stepping into a life of comfort. Instead, it was a gilded prison. After their wedding, the true colors of the Alyamai family unfolded like rot from inside a ripe fruit. Her mother-in-law had died years ago, and her father-in-law, known as Chief by everyone, was a cold, domineering man with a spine of steel and a heart of stone. He tolerated Adejua for appearances, especially during business events where a pretty, soft-spoken wife was useful. But at home, she was invisible, unless he needed someone to insult. Kelechi, once so doting, had turned into a ghost. He traveled constantly, leaving Adejua behind to endure his father's constant belittling. No calls. No messages. Whispers of infidelity crept into her ears from family friends, neighbors, even church members. Adejua had learned to smile through the pain. Her silence was survival. But today, on her birthday, she decided she had had enough. "You've turned my son into a joke," Chief growled as she stood at the top of the staircase. "No job, no children, no contribution to this family. What are you good for?" Adejua didn't speak. She just looked at him. She had always looked small in this house, but something in her posture shifted that morning, shoulders back, eyes clear. "I said pack your things. I want you gone before noon." She walked down the stairs slowly, feeling the polished marble under her bare feet. Each step was a goodbye to the version of herself that used to beg for kindness in this house. "I understand, sir," she said softly. "You think this is a joke?" he thundered. "If you don't leave now, I'll call the police." "Do what you must." She turned and walked back to the bedroom she once shared with Kelechi. As she packed her modest belongings, mostly clothes and books, her fingers brushed the edges of old photos, wedding gifts, and silent memories. She didn't cry. She had done enough of that already. She stepped out an hour later with 2 small bags and the house deed tucked inside a file in her tote. Chief was on the phone, bragging loudly to a friend about how he had put that lazy woman in her place. His words echoed in the corridor like a slap. She paused in the living room, looking around one last time. "I'll be back shortly," she said to no one in particular. The house her mother left her was in Lekki, a quiet, well-kept compound surrounded by flowering trees. Adejua had only visited it once as a child. Her mother had never spoken much about the property. "It's not for now," she would always say, brushing Adejua's hair on quiet nights. But one day, you'll understand. Standing before the gate now, with keys in her hand and tears stinging her eyes, Adesua finally understood. Inside was a fully furnished home, untouched since her mother's last visit. The scent of lavender lingered in the cushions. Her mother's presence was everywhere, books on the shelves, handwritten recipes in the kitchen, framed quotes on the wall. One, in particular, stood out: the best revenge is to rebuild, not to retaliate. She smiled. Over the next few days, Adesua transformed the house into her sanctuary. She got a job teaching at a nearby school, enrolled in a weekend design course, and started volunteering with a women's center. Her days were full, not with sorrow, but purpose. But the twist came 2 weeks later. Chief was served a letter, a formal legal notice. The property in Ikoyi, where he had lived for 25 years, had been quietly transferred to Adesua through her late husband. It turned out Kelechi, in one last act of guilt, had transferred the house into Adesua's name before abandoning her. But the papers had been delayed until her birthday. Chief couldn't believe it. He stormed into a law office, demanding reversal. "She forged it," he yelled. "No, sir," the lawyer said calmly. "Your son signed these documents. It's legally binding." Within weeks, Chief received another notice, this time an eviction. Adesua returned, but not as the frightened girl who once begged for a corner in that house. She came back with keys. With confidence. With silence that screamed dignity. As movers emptied the house, Chief watched in disbelief from the veranda. "You planned this," he said bitterly. "No," she replied. "You did." He stared at her, this woman he once dismissed as useless. And for the first time, he was silent. The news of Chief Aluymade's eviction traveled faster than a wildfire in Harmattan. In Lagos society, where image was everything, a man of his status being forced out of his own house by a woman he once disrespected made him a walking scandal. His pride couldn't bear it. He moved temporarily into a friend's boys' quarters in Surulere, refusing to speak to journalists or neighbors who sniffed around, hungry for gossip. Meanwhile, Adesua remained quiet. She never granted interviews, never made a post on social media, and never tried to humiliate him publicly. Her silence began to haunt him more than her words ever could. But the truth was, Adesua was not the same woman he had once kicked out. She had blossomed. Every morning, she opened the gates of Mama's Haven, the shelter she built in her late mother's name. Within weeks, the house became a refuge for broken women, battered wives, teen mothers, housemaids abused by their employers. She fed them, clothed them, and more importantly, gave them hope. It wasn't just charity, it was redemption. One afternoon, as she sat beneath the mango tree in the backyard journaling plans for the shelter's expansion, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Kelechi. He looked gaunt, thinner than she remembered. His once well-groomed beard was now patchy. His designer clothes looked worn out, and his usual arrogant smirk was replaced by a nervous twitch. "Adesua," he said softly. She stood up, watching him without emotion. There was a time her heart would have raced. But not anymore. "What do you want, Kelechi?" "I heard about the house. About my father. About everything. I didn't know he'd do that to you." She let out a short laugh. "He didn't do anything I didn't already expect." He rubbed his hands nervously. "Look, I made mistakes. I messed up. But I want to fix things. Maybe we could talk about us?" Her eyes narrowed. The audacity stunned her. "There is no us, Kelechi. Not anymore. I know. But I'm broke. I lost the company deal. I just need a place to stay for a while. Just until I get back on my feet. Please." And there it was, the real reason. He didn't miss her. He missed comfort. The very house he had abandoned her in, the one he never called to check on while his father tormented her, now he wanted back in. Adejua looked him in the eye. No. He blinked. No, he echoed, surprised. You see, she continued, her voice firm, what you both failed to realize was that the girl you left behind, she grew. She learned to survive without you. And now she thrives without you. Kelechi stood still, ashamed. He wanted to argue, but the defeat on his face said everything. Without another word, he turned and left, his shadow long and heavy behind him. Adejua exhaled deeply. She had not just inherited a house that morning, she had inherited her freedom. Weeks passed. The shelter began drawing attention from NGOs and local media. Donations poured in. Volunteers joined. Even local churches began referring women in need to Mama's Haven. Adejua was often asked to speak at events, and each time she stood on a stage, telling her story, more women found the courage to leave behind what no longer served them. One rainy night, as thunder rumbled across the skies, a knock sounded at the shelter gate. A young girl stood there, drenched, her lips split, holding a toddler in her arms. Her eyes held the same fear Adejua once carried. Adejua pulled her in, wrapped a shawl around her, and offered her warm food. You're safe now, she said gently. This is your home too. And at that moment, Adejua knew, this was her purpose. The house her father-in-law tried to push her out of had become a lighthouse for the lost. Months passed, and Mama's Haven was no longer just a home, it had become a symbol. In newspapers and on TV panels, Adejua's name was whispered with reverence. The woman who turned rejection into refuge, they called her. But not everyone saw it as inspiration. Chief Olumide, now practically invisible in the Lagos elite circles he once ruled, watched in bitter silence as his former daughter-in-law became something he never expected, respected. He had been reduced to dependency, living off favors, borrowing dignity wherever he could find it. His name no longer opened doors. One quiet evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, a familiar car parked in front of Mama's Haven. This time, it wasn't a victim or a runaway. It was Chief Olumide himself. He stood at the gate for a while, not knocking. Just watching. Adejua, who had been pruning the flowers by the driveway, looked up. She recognized him instantly, though the man before her was far removed from the prideful tyrant who once ruled his home like a kingdom. His clothes were wrinkled. His shoulders hunched. Time had humbled him. Their eyes met. I won't stay long, he said, voice hoarse. I wanted to see what you've done with the place. She nodded slowly, motioning him to come inside. They sat quietly on the veranda, the same place where she once overheard him calling her a disgrace. Now, the silence between them held history. I never imagined I'd end up like this, he finally said. Disgraced. Dependent. Forgotten. Adejua looked at him calmly. You had power, Chief. But you used it to crush others, not to build. He bowed his head. I was wrong about you. All along. I thought you were weak because you were quiet. But it was me who was weak, hiding behind status, never lifting anyone. She didn't reply right away. The breeze carried the scent of gardenia as streetlights began to glow in the dimming sky. You hurt me deeply, she said. And I forgave you, not because you deserved it, but because I refused to carry you in my heart any longer. He swallowed, his pride shriveling under the weight of her grace. I'm not asking to come back, he said. I just came to say, thank you. For showing me what true strength looks like. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, Adejua stood. There's always room for change. But it must begin with service. She handed him a small booklet, an application to volunteer at Mama's Haven. If you want to make things right, start here. Learn how to serve the people you once ignored. He looked at the form, then at her, his eyes moist. And for the first time in his life, Chief Alyamide said the words no one ever thought he would. "I'm sorry." That was the beginning of something unexpected. Chief Alyamide, the same man who had once thrown her out without mercy, now arrived every Tuesday and Thursday to sweep floors, drive women to medical appointments, and mentor abused boys who had grown up angry. At first, the women distrusted him. Rightfully so. But over time, they saw something in him shift, not for attention, but for redemption. Slowly, he earned his place, not through wealth, but through humility. As for Kelechi, he disappeared from the scene entirely. Rumors said he left for Ghana. Others claimed he remarried a foreigner. But Adejua no longer cared. His chapter had ended long before he realized. The house, the one she was kicked out of,